Welcome to Valhalla Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Becky Hill, otherwise known as Soul Chaser Becky, and I am a proud Viking geek. I fell in love with the history, culture and mythology of the Viking Age, and I have been on an endless quest for more ever since. Join me as I discuss all things Norse with those who have been inspired by Viking Age history and Norse mythology in their creative works, or those who have studied the sagas and archaeology, and review how such subjects are being presented to modern audiences today. If you like Viking stuff, you are welcome in my Valhalla, and I hope you stay for the conversation. Welcome everyone to Valhalla Conversations podcast, and this is the very first episode, and I apologise for being so late, of the 2026 content season, when I can speak English. That my first guests for this year is not one but two, and it's a lovely husband and wife duo, both creative in their own ways, and of course both have touched on the topic of Vikings. So I'm delighted to welcome CJ Adrien and his wife Crystal Whithaus. Welcome to the podcast, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Now, you are here in my humble virtual Valhalla to talk about your wonderful children's book that you've done together called I Am a Viking, a history book about the Vikings for kids. So I guess we should start off with where it all began. Whose idea was it?
It was Christoph. It was CJ's idea first off. When I met him, he was working on his second or third book. I'm not quite sure. And he found out I could draw, and he's like, "Oh, well, you should do like a little bit of an audition for me." And so I drew the first page, and he was just super excited, and he goes, "Well, you have to do a kids book with me." And I'm like, "I guess I have to do it."
I can be pushy, I guess. You're making me sound like a great candidate on the singles market. Audition for me, woman.
Do it now. Snap, snap.
So I'm guessing kind of like then, CJ, have you noticed like that there's perhaps a gap in the market for books for kids telling them kind of the real history of Vikings in this kind of very illustrative and kind of like very easy to read way without it being too wordy or too bogged down in facts?
Yeah, it began in 2018, I want to say. Yeah, I think it was 2018. And there was the traveling exhibition from the Swedish National Museum that came here to Nantes. And I happened to be visiting at the time with my first son, who was at the time, I think, 3. And we did their whole thing. It's a wonderful exhibit. And if you have a chance to go see it, wherever it happened, wherever you may be, if it comes to your town, go see it. It's a must see. I believe it was at the Smithsonian most recently. I could be off by that. So they had a little gift shop at the end. They had kids' books. And they had one kid's book that was sponsored by the Swedish National Museum. It was translated in English and in French, and it was by an artist from I don't know where. And reading through it, well, we bought it, and I didn't really read through it. And then we got home, and I read it to my son. I was like, "This is awful." Objectively, like
there was so much missing.
Right, there's a lot missing. Like the illustrations were really crummy and not super well done, and the information was poorly presented, poorly translated. So I was like, this isn't, I'm surprised this made the cut to be part of the Swedish National Museum's, portfolio of things to sell at their exhibit. So I kind of thought back then, like, I could make a kid's book. I just need to find a good illustrator. So I worked over the idea in my head for a couple of years. And then when I met Crystal, it was just one of those far away ideas I didn't think was ever going to happen at that point. And as she mentioned, I was working on my novels. And so that was really the focus. And it came up in conversation. We'd been dating for a while, actually.
Yeah.
It was like the summer. It was like almost a year in. And she's like, "Oh, yeah, I draw." "What do you mean you draw?" This is classic Crystal, where you get information on a need to know basis. If she doesn't think you need to know, you don't get to know. So so it just came up. I was like, oh, I'd love to make a kids book. Oh, well, I draw. Oh, well, I didn't say you must audition. I just said, would you like to try? And she's like, oh, okay, I'll give it a whirl. And then she drew this picture. I'll put it up for those watching visually.
Yes, if you're on YouTube, you can see it now. There'll be pictures of different pages and sections popping up throughout the interview.
Yep.
But as also, if you're listening on the audio podcast, do join us on the YouTube platform. It's all wonderful.
So you can see the visual representation. And she actually went off of the Viking kit that I had in my office that was displayed in, my background for videos and so forth. And then slightly modeled off of my first son, right? Because that's who we went off of. And yeah, I saw that and I said, okay, I think we have an opportunity here. So then the question was, well, Crystal, do you want to make a book with me? I got down on one knee and I offered her a pen or pack of pencils and a budget and said, will you make a kid's book with me?
There was a sister-in-law in the background. Her hamster was present.
as witness.
I love that. I absolutely love it. Because it is quite kind of like, of course, as a reader and someone who loves books, both picture books, storybooks, non-fiction books, I kind of do respect the effort that goes into illustrated books, and especially for children, because it is its art form in its own right, because it is a talent. And I really like, it's almost got a classic feel, your artwork, Crystal. It reminds me of books that I grew up with, and I mean that as a compliment in the greatest way, because I've got my own little girl who's 5.5, and some of the illustrated books that she has, they're all flat 2D, kind of like abstract images. They don't really represent anything from reality, whereas kind of like when I think back to books that I grew up with in the 1980s and 90s, they had that realistic mood about them. They just had that realistic connection. And I really, really liked the illustrations you've done for this book. And of course, I guess CJ, his novels being primarily from Viking Age historical fiction, was it a deep dive for you to go into Vikings then and learn about what you were then having to draw about?
Actually, it was. Yeah. There was a lot of things that I had no idea. I mean, the best representation of Vikings that I knew of was Vikings the TV show, and I even knew that was to be taken with a grain of salt. And it's pretty much been a learning experience ever since I met him. Every day I learn about something new, and I'm just like, oh well, I have them to thank for my hair tools. And
oh yeah, that was surprising. I was like, they had tweezers.
They had tweezers.
Well, anyone who's been to the Louvre, we went to Paris, and we went to the Louvre, and they had the Egyptian exhibit. The ancient Egyptians had a pair of tweezers there. They had a little makeup kit and stuff. So it's not
the Vikings, but I mean,
Vikings had them, but they
had.
They did. They were well groomed. They had lots of combs. Lots and lots of combs.
Yes,
so did everyone else. Yeah.
And so I'm learning something new every day.
And kind of like, was there a particular bit, kind of like, because it's a lovely kind of like got a narrative to it, so it's not just kind of like facts and figures throwing at a very young brain, but it kind of like, that's I guess where kind of like CJ's storytelling talent comes in, because it is kind of like from the perspective of a young Viking boy speaking almost directly to the reader, saying, oh yes, we do this and we do this, we don't do that, but we also do this, and my dad's going off to do that, and my granddad did this. And I just like how it kind of like really embeds the family and brings it back down to a very human level that even kind of like a young child can understand, because their world is their family when they're a young child. And I suppose, was there a bit as you were drawing it that kind of like really kind of like, I guess, impressed you or surprised you as you were kind of like learning through the eyes of this Viking boy that you were drawing?
What was one thing that surprised me in here?
She's refreshing her memory by
I
going
am
back
refreshing
to the book.
my memory.
I will confirm when you've created a certain number of works, sometimes you forget what you've done. People will remind you and you'll say, is that really? My editor does that to me all the time. Oh, but in book 3 he did this. Oh, right.
I blame having children. It just wonders or not for the memory.
Oh, very much. I was kind of impressed with like things like how they consulted like a vulva, and they had like this almost town hall way of conducting themselves when it came to laws or disagreements, things like that. And
Yeah,
even
that's interesting.
yeah, and even just the little boys learning how to fight from their teacher, starting very young, which I assume they did start very young.
If you were the chieftain's son, sure.
If you're the
Yeah.
chieftain's,
If you're a farmer's son, maybe
Definitely.
not so much. You know, like,
maybe
Yeah.
not so much.
you get a pitchfork. Early in the Viking Age, that was very true.
But I was really impressed with, even though I feel like they're kind of like a nomadic kind of culture in a way, but
you've heard me
their
say that
sense
a
of
lot. Yeah.
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I was impressed with, like, even though they're a nomadic kind of culture, their sense of community.
Yeah. Yeah, she's referring specifically to some of those frameworks, like Christian Koymann's Monarchs and Hydarchs, where he talks about these being floating communities of people on boats, and so
Yes.
we can almost see them through the same lens as we might see the Huns or the Magyars, you know. And it wasn't just men who roved; it was entire families in certain respects, especially those who went to Iceland and those who were attempting colonization efforts, Normandy, etc. And so, yeah, that's something that Crystal's been picking up on. Of, oh yeah, you've heard me say that it's a
floating community.
Yeah. Well, and when we were making the book, I was writing book 3 of mine, which is called The Kings of the Sea, where I pick up on that idea. And so I was trying to play with this idea that these fleets are actually floating cities, and they can go anywhere they want and set up shop, and, you know, so and that's something that we had talked about when you were making the book. Yeah, I was like, oh yeah.
It's just little bits and pieces of new information, little conversation while I drew things, and like about their, I guess, myths and legends, or I would call it their religion in a way.
Definitely, that works.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting how that again, it kind of circles back to the vulva and everything.
I mean,
like
that bit as well, I must admit that a bit impressed me, because it's not often that kind of like, I've got a couple, and it really is only a couple, because I've got a shelf full of children's books featuring Vikings in various guises, both kind of like historical and fantastical, because of course I've got Cressida Cowell's wonderful How to Train Your Dragon. Even if they do all wear horned helmets and happen to have dragons, it's still got Vikings in, so I like it. But there's not many kind of like references to kind of like the girls or the women of the Norse society or culture, that besides kind of that really come through in books for children. It is often kind of like from the boys' perspective, or the teenage boys' perspective, or the men's perspective, because of course they're the ones that globally made the biggest impact, I suppose, because they were the ones going off on their long ships and raiding and pillaging and doing all the wonderful things. And aptly enough, we are discussing this on International Women's Day, so it's quite nice that you've picked up on the vulva, because I think that is a figure of great mystery and great interest to a lot of people, because we don't know much about how they practiced what they did. We can find their burials, we can roughly identify them from the artifacts found within them, but we don't really know how they did what they did. So it's especially kind of like when you think about the Viking series, which you mentioned, and the vulva in that one kind of like being one of great prophecy, but also kind of like singled out in society because of their disability and malformed face kind of thing. It's always interesting how women characters are interpreted when they're coming from, especially kind of with this book, kind of like from a very common background, kind of like of a Viking village and a chieftain and a family, and that kind of glimpses a small microcosm of society, instead of looking at a queen or a kind of like, of course we've got Lagertha, again referring back to Vikings, and kind of like female figures from sagas, not necessarily history, but certainly sagas. So it's interesting that you picked up on the vulva, because I think a lot of people would find that more interesting. And it did make me think, when I was reviewing this book, kind of like, it is nice that it is from the boy's perspective, of course, being the chieftain's son, they did have the most power, the prestige, the status. But we don't really know much about the girls besides them going off to get married with so-and-so's son at some point. So maybe that's something you could address later on, CJ.
Yeah.
Or you.
Or me.
You can come up with a girl's perspective.
A
'cause I
girl's
think that would be more
perspective on
natural.
Vikings.
And then you just use me as a historical consultant.
Yeah, I could make a girl's book on what happened in the Vikings age, what she did every day.
She's in here. I mean, she's a character.
She's a character. There's a sister.
Yeah, she gets a dress from the dad who brings it back from France. He's like, here's a nice dress and a glass bead necklace from Italy.
Yep.
Yeah.
And all the interesting things. And you see like the mom, she's taking care of the household and she's making sure he takes a bath, even though he really doesn't want to.
That was
my life.
Especially because kind of like it made me think back to, I think it was somewhere in the if not the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, definitely a piece of manuscript from the Anglo-Saxon times of the Anglo-Saxons complaining about how all their women are chasing after the Vikings because they're all clean, because they take more baths than the men. And I just love that idea.
Yeah. That's true. That was a real thing. Yeah, because they were well, it ties back to the idea in Christianity that vanity is a sin. Although in the wider population it wasn't so practiced as it was amongst the clergy. And there's a writer from, I believe, the 11th century, John of Wallingford, who famously said, "The smellier we are, the holier we are." And so there is this interesting thing where that's where a lot of the kind of myth around how dirty people were in the Middle Ages. Vanity is a sin, so it's Christian Europeans in the Middle Ages were dirty. Actually, no, they had baths and they had bathhouses. Some of them were run by the church, actually. But still, we have this myth because it's true that in monastic communities they were averse to bathing because of trying to be as non-vain as possible. Right. So it's like stay as clean as you need to not die of an infection, but no more.
Well, then I am certainly vain because I love a good shower.
Good hot shower.
Well, we all know and appreciate the kind of like the daily practice of modern hygiene these days. Because of course they wouldn't have cleaned their teeth and they didn't have half the sugar that we have in our own diet. But then, of course, their bread was probably rock hard as well because they didn't have fine milled white flour like we all enjoy.
Fair.
As you mentioned, CJ, kind of like the robes from France and the glass beads from Italy, were there particular artifacts that you came across in your own research and studies that you wanted to then place into this narrative to give it that connection to real things that have been found?
Yeah, I used the main book that I bought from the Swedish National Museum exhibit and used a lot of the artifacts that were contained in there. And then when presenting the story, I started my career as a school teacher. So I understand how kids think, what they respond to, that sort of thing. So that's why I went with this is a 7-year-old boy doing a show and tell for his class kind of thing, right? It's like bring your dad to work day kind of thing. So he's like, my dad's a Viking. So that was the idea. And then a lot of the artifacts that you see in here are things, so like the vulva staff, for example. That was one of the artifacts that's at that traveling display for the Swedish National Museum. So
there's lots of different vulva staffs too. That was just the one that I thought was aesthetically pleasing.
Or alleged. They're not sure.
Alleged vulva staff.
Me over here being like, let's be pedantic.
Yeah. And let's see, there were the combs and the picks, of course, which we've already talked about. And what else was there?
All the beads.
The beads, of course.
Amulets. I think the one discussion that we had was the how to address violence. And that's the criticism I've gotten from people when I've tried to promote the book. Is how dare you make a children's book about the Viking Age? Weren't they just all rapists and murderers and etc.? And it's like, well, to a significant degree they were, but also they weren't, right? I mean, this is part of the Great Migrations period. If you think the Vikings were violent, try Charlemagne. that guy was exceedingly violent, and he had levers of power and resources the Vikings didn't have. So he was killing people on a massive scale compared to the Vikings. So, it's like, were they more violent than anybody else? No. They were just doing what people did back then. It's a subsistence society. So, if I'm hungry and there's no food, I have to go get food. And if the only way to get food is to fight somebody for it, that's what's going to happen. So then we did debate, because we have the infamous scene where they're chasing away monks from a monastery.
They asked them to leave.
Yeah.
And and we politely asked them to leave. So it's like, how do we deal? And so I had to really think about how would a kid synthesize that, right? To make understand, how would it be communicated to a child that that's happening or that's what they do? So I asked my son, because he was all into the Vikings, so he grew up around my shields and my kit and the books and everything. I was always big. His first name's Leif, so he's obviously named after a Viking. Leif, like Leif the Lucky, and then his middle name is William, and people go, "Oh, that's pretty vanilla." I was like William the Conqueror. So I asked him, I said, what do you think they're doing? And he just said it just so innocently. He's like, "Oh, they're just asking them to leave."
Bless him.
Okay. Well, and so that's how we're going to do it. Yeah. So there's not, and then because he's a kid in a village, he's not, I mean, it is still geared toward a modern audience. If we had made his perspective purely Viking, it's like I always say in other forums, is never go full Viking, because you'll just alienate modern audiences. But children at the time would have been exposed to a level of violence that kids today just don't, because you're on a farm, you're killing animals every day to live, and and then there's violence happening, between the different factions and so forth. So we don't get a lot of that from him, although we do get the whole he's being trained to fight because he wants to be like his dad.
Right.
So there's and so that's the approach we took. It's kind of a middle of the road. It's still very G rated. So
yeah, I think another thing we decided to omit from the book was when we talked about slavery.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That was a Crystal decision.
I thought that, I was like, let's leave that out of the book. Because we talked about
any consolation, you wouldn't be the first, because I remember learning about Vikings in my GCSE history year. Actually, no, before my GCSE, because I didn't, for some strange reason, fate made me not choose history as my GCSE. But I learned about it before. Of course, we learned about Vikings versus Alfred, but we never ever touched on slavery. We touched about the raids, and of course, how they killed lots of priests and monks in various monasteries and things like that. But never touched on slavery, and it is definitely a thing that not many people realize about the Vikings. And equally about your point, CJ, kind of like how, yes, they were violent and yes, they killed people, but so did everyone else in that era. I mean, England was a set of feudal kingdoms, just like Scandinavia was a set of feudal kingdoms before either of them found their own united identity as a kingdom of their own, kind of thing.
Yeah, actually, I have the page here. So there's a page where it says, in the autumn, they returned with lots of gold and silver and exciting stories of their adventures. And there was originally a page after that had the slaves with the iron collars, like they have in the exhibit.
Yes.
And then if I recall correctly, the line that I put was, they also bring people back that I'm not allowed to talk to, or something like that.
And I was like,
and Crystal's like, no, don't do it.
Dark.
Yeah.
Well,
Too
in a
dark
way,
for
strange
children.
way, so like just taking that idea, but linking it back to the Viking series, and I'm trying not to make too much about the Viking series because they've been discussed and researched many times over now. It's been around for a long time. But that is one thing I think I would tip my hat to them in, that they did show kind of the aspect of a Christian monk being taken and turned into a slave, but also how they kind of like maybe address the language barrier, because that's something that always puzzled me. Kind of like, I know Anglo-Saxons shared a lot of words that were similar to kind of like Old Norse, but of course there wasn't just Old Norse from Norway. There was Danes, there was Swedes, and they all had their own native tongue. So I do kind of, depending on which Viking took you, you may or not may be able to understand what your new master was telling you to do, and thus the beatings and stuff. But I was kind of like impressed with the I think it was Athelstan, his name was. I think it was. It's been a long time since I've seen
Sounds right. Sounds right. Yeah.
It was with his storyline, although I didn't like the way it ended, but most of his storyline I was impressed with, and how that relationship came across. But of course, as a kid's book, yes, there probably are limits we have to set in terms of kind of like, because like you don't have rape, for of course, in this book. And I remember an early episode I did with the lovely Dr. Chris Tuckley, formerly of the Orbit Viking Centre in York Archaeology, but now working at Selby Abbey. We were discussing the Eric the Viking by the Monty Python film and how that features rape from the start. And yet you wouldn't have that nowadays, but that was just back in the 1980s when that was just their cultural view of the Vikings and how they raped and pillaged, and that was it. So it's nice
that subject actually is a debated one. So if you go to the source material, it is the word rape is conspicuously absent. The monks were not telling us that they were going around rape. The rape thing is a 19th century assumption. Oh, well, they must have been doing this. But if you look at the early targets, they were hitting monasteries. And if you look at Norse culture from, say, the Icelandic sagas, like ergi, which is homosexuality, was very frowned upon. That would make you a nithing. And so which is an untouchable, basically. So, so that, were they raping monks? I mean, I'm sure there's a few, but but generally speaking, it's not something that's well attested or attested at all in the primary sources. It's just assumed. And if we look at the genetic spread, it's true that actually even the genetic spread, like all the genetic studies, it's still in its infancy. So it's not clear. I mean, the assumption is if you take slaves home, and some of those are women, they're not going to have a good time. There have been papers on this idea of, in popular culture, the first people say about Vikings is rape, then pillage, then this. But actually, hopefully we don't get you banned from YouTube by saying this word too much. but in the primary sources, it's not there. So it's an interesting modern lens that's actually been transposed onto the Viking Age without clear evidence to support it. Now we can all assume that there was some of that, if not quite a bit of that going on, just because of the time period and population movements and so forth. But it's probably not the thing we should all lead with, right? Pillaging should probably be number one.
I mean, that
anyway.
was
That
makes
makes
the main
sense
point,
when you think about the slavery too, because they obviously wouldn't want to get a lot of their female slaves pregnant, because then that's just extra effort to keep them alive, whereas they want them to be in good condition for sale at the markets.
You want labor,
not
right?
Damaged.
That also kind of explains a little bit why they would have attacked monasteries first, because monasteries A, held a lot of wealth, but B, the people you could capture in a monastery were men, and men were better at working the fields, right? They're stronger. And so if you're looking for cheap labor, that's who you're going to target first. And then if you get some women just by happenstance, maybe, and then we have the example of how, the genetic testing done in Iceland has also shown that a significant portion of their ancestry is Irish, because Icelanders went down to Ireland, captured women. Okay. So that one.
I was going to say, I was like, wasn't there a shortage of wives, so to speak? And that was another reason why they pillaged, because they needed women.
Well, for Iceland specifically,
Iceland, okay.
We have evidence to show that they went to Ireland, grabbed some women, and then made babies with them. And I don't think we should assume that it was consensual. So yeah. So yes, I mean, so I'm not saying that it didn't happen, but I do like to bring up the idea that the fact that it's something that popular culture leads with, but it's something that's not at all attested in the sources, makes it one of those thorny little issues that not a lot of people want to bring up, because it's dangerous territory, especially in modern times, right? Because you can gosh, I don't want to use the wrong idiom talking about it either. I was just about to say,
I appreciate you bringing it up, CJ. I really do appreciate bringing it up, because it is certainly an angle or an aspect that I've never actually realised or considered. And yet I am the product of all this popular culture messaging going out there, and thinking, like, as you say, it's become such kind of like a cliche phrase, like as part of the stereotype, as much as the horned helmets. which of course I'm delighted to say that you don't feature at all.
No.
No horned
I'm
helmets.
I'm a horned helmet evangelist, anti-evangelist. In fact, if you go to my website, I have 2 articles now because I did a part 2 where I explore the topic of did they wear helmets at all, especially in the early Viking Age, because we only have one preserved helmet from the Viking Age that is confirmed to be quote unquote Viking. Now we can argue the nomenclature of that, but we'll just use the loose set popular culture sense of the term. But it's the Gerbundu helmet, which was found in Norway. Now people will point to the Weymouth helmet, which is in England, as, oh no, that one's from the Viking Age. Actually, no. All they found was a jawbone. The museum thought, gosh, a jawbone by itself doesn't look very good. What if we made up this helmet and put it here to frame the jawbone? It's a fabrication. It's actually a fabrication by the museum.
Scandal.
So and then there are shards, like pieces of helmet from different places in like Poland and the Baltic states. But there's not enough for us to do any sort of recreation, so we don't know. So there's only one helmet, and then that begs the question: why? Do we have so? And one of the theories is that maybe they're just repurposed, as metal as repurposed. Actually, why would that be? Because think of how many swords we have. Think of how many Ulfbert swords we have. 144 Ulfbert swords, Damascene steel. Those would have been exceptionally rare, and we don't have any helmets. Like none, 0. But then you have from the Life of Saint-Aubin in France. This is Vikings all wearing helmets. So the chroniclers are thinking, these guys. But is that just a later fabrication? Where again, the assumption that we know what these guys were about. They must have all been wearing helmets, right? But
now
it's
you
not
make me
clear.
think about the Bayeux Tapestry, which is actually due to arrive at the British Museum, I should say, not library, British Museum this summer. So we're borrowing it from Normandy for a little bit for the first time in quite a while, I believe.
And the Normans had helmets, and that's well documented. But we can't really call them Viking at that point because they had become the ruling class of a French territory. So it's really, that's an early medieval kind of early knight kind of helmet, right? In fact it's called a Norman casque. So it's not even. So as far as the Viking Age is concerned, it is not clear that they wore helmets at all, especially early in the Viking Age. Now, later in the Viking Age, we can kind of we can start pointing to other pieces of evidence to show that maybe they did, but the lack of evidence is really surprising, and it's an unsolved mystery. It's unanswerable because lack of evidence is not does not mean that they didn't exist. But then again, it doesn't prove that they existed either, so we're stuck in this universal negative that we can't get out of. So I have 2 articles where I've gone over both sides of the argument thoroughly, and I tend to lean toward I think early in the Viking Age, they were like 16-year-old boys who want to go ride their bike, and wear your helmet now. Well, if you're not going to wear them, I'm not going to use this very precious iron to make you a helmet. I'll just make something else that we can use on the farm, and you can go risk your life getting hit in the head. Also with Raynor Oskarsson and William Short, who wrote Men of Terror, I had this conversation with them. Now they were reluctant to really answer, but one of the things that we had talked about, one of the ideas that we talked about, is this idea of drengur, like the honor, right? This I don't want to call it an honor code, but it's like the kind of the expected conduct of a warrior, and being brave and so forth. And it could be that they didn't wear helmets on purpose, because it was a show of valor and so forth. All this, by the way, came up during the show Vikings, when people were like, why don't the main characters wear helmets? And I was like, aha, this is where the show Vikings might actually have done something right by accident.
Now you're making me flick through my copy, because it's got me thinking about something I learned really recently, which actually reflects the kind of the idea, as you say, of the Viking helmet, even though we have, I would say, only one actual example of it. I was able to go to one event for the Orbit Viking Festival this year, which was the Valhalla Symposium. It's Viking Age Living History for All Assembly. And it's just with lots of living historians, as they now like to be known, sharing their research and what they do and practice. And there was a guy that did the last speech, and he was speaking about mail, and correcting us all that it's not chainmail, it's mail. And how there is only one mail that's been dated from a grave from the Viking Age, but how his theory was that a lot of the mail we think these Vikings had was very rare because it was very costly, because it was a high prized material, and that they probably didn't make it themselves. It was probably old Roman centurion stuff from when the Roman Empire collapsed, and that just got passed around and either got passed down generations or it got melted down back into iron and turned into something else, which was really surprising because, of course, as Crystal has mentioned, in the Viking series, there's a lot of mail going around. They just seem to be exceptionally wealthy with their mail and their leather armor in both degrees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
there's lots of animals to be killed.
The Franks were making it
Excuse me.
quite. The Franks were making quite a bit of mail, so it could be that they were just picked off of dead people. That's what I do in my books. They're not making any of this stuff. They'll be in a battle and they'll take down like a wealthy Frankish, soldier or noble. And then, oh, that's my mail now. And in fact, there's a scene in one of the books where they're like, "Does anyone know how to fix this?" And they're like, "No." There's a hole in mine. Well, you're just gonna have to find a new one, and just don't stab that guy so hard next time.
Stab that guy so hard next time.
Yeah, because this guy actually pointed out to a scene. I think it's like one of those kind of like border scenes in the Bayes Tapestry where it does appear that someone is pulling the mail off a dead warrior. And I can't remember if it was a dead Norman. Possibly a dead Norman. I think all the Normans were depicted in mail. I don't think the Anglo-Saxons were that fortunate.
Yeah, we actually, in the book, we have the father.
How do you do it?
And you're going to laugh because we just talked about all this, but he's wearing a Gearbundu helmet. He's got an Ulfbert, and then he's wearing mail. And then he's got a leather, one of those leather jerkins on top of the mail. So that's a deliberate choice to kind of, it's just to really frame it in. This is, if you could imagine the wealthiest of the wealthy, like basically the guy who owned the Gearbundu helmet, what would he have looked like? And so I recommended to Crystal to do, like kit him out the best you can. No guarantees that this guy would have actually existed, but at least you get to see some of the artifacts that have been recovered.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a nice touch.
So I made him as pretty as possible.
Sorry.
Say it again.
I made him as pretty as possible.
By Viking standards, he is, of course, very pretty because, of course, their beards were a big thing. Everyone thinks of Vikings with long beards and plaits and little ornaments going in. Yeah. So how long did it take you both to work on this book and then eventually get it ready for being published? Was it a year, more than a year, a couple of years?
I want to say it took about, because I did it, almost every day. So it took about... I did 3 pictures a week. I don't know.
Something like that. So
I want to say a couple months. Yeah. Yeah. 3 to 6 months in total.
I think my part took 20 minutes. It's because I live in this world, right? So it's just, it didn't take long to come up with the different things. And then not everything that I did ended up in the book, but and not all the pictures that you drew ended up in the book either.
Right.
So we had, but yeah, I think it took a solid couple of months. Then it had to be so
edited and refinished.
Why don't you talk about your art style, like how you drew it? Because I think that's really.
I chose I would call it cartoony. Some people would call it maybe a little anime-ish, but I feel like it's maybe something in between. I wanted it to be a little more realistic in like how you were talking about, very 2D, very abstract, very simple. I wanted it to be a little more detailed.
Yeah.
And
it's all pencil drawn by hand, right?
It's all pencil drawn by hand. I've tried doing digital pads and programs and things like that, but it just doesn't have the same feel to it.
No.
And I can't create the way I want to. And I prefer the feel of the pencil on the paper.
I agree. It's something I remember a lot about my kids' books. My favorite ones from when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, they were all hand drawn. They all had it like that Shirley Hughes series, they're all got that hand drawn feel, and it's just it connects more on a kind of like very visual and almost emotional level than just kind of like something that's done digitally, I think. So that immediately appealed to me. Just as soon as I saw the cover, I thought, oh, it's hand drawn. I can see the colouring marks. It's just, it just got me all excited.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad that it makes me excited too. Just like I said, the feel of it, and I feel like you get almost. I mean, yes, like digital, you can kind of do whatever you want, and you can make it as vivid as you want. But there's something just more tangible and more earthy and more colorful about actually doing it with the real colored pencils, with clay, with charcoal, even with just felt tip paper.
Yeah, once it was drawn, then you had to outline everything with the felt.
Oh yeah, I had to outline everything,
yes.
and I had to blend the colored pencil because I used Prismas to do the coloring, and it's a kind of colored pencil that's like clay almost, as opposed to regular kind of graphite colored pencils. Yeah. And so I had a really good time with it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm curious now to learn about what pages or parts of the story that didn't make the cut, so to speak.
Well, slavery.
Obviously, we know you intentionally didn't do slavery, but did you just do a lot and then couldn't fit it all in for budgetary reasons, or you just wanted it to be a short book?
No, I think it was just creative choices. There's just some stuff that was like, is this something that anybody needs to know? Some of it's like, it's some of the more controversial stuff. Did this really happen? Was this really a thing? And it's like, man, maybe kind of keep it out. So I really wanted to keep it as faithful to the current scholarship as we could, without diving too deep into the controversies and the stuff that's still a toss-up and debatable, right? I mean, there's stuff in here that's definitely still not completely known, and so that'll be in there. I mean, it's part of. I mean, we're dealing with a time and place where we really have so little evidence that it's like trying to put together a puzzle with half the pieces, and so yeah. But I think everything in here. I mean, it's like I said to Crystal a couple of times since we released the book. I was like, this is the book I'm most proud of. I didn't even do most of it because it's one thing to write it down, right, which is fine, but it's another thing to see somebody render that into art and seeing, and it's just I think the drawings are just outstanding. I mean, this is the book I would want for my kids. That made me really happy when I saw that, where I was like, oh man, you get it. I mean, that's just, and this could be a bestseller. I mean, of course,
This could be outstanding, amazing, even.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the final product came out better than we could have imagined.
Oh, I'm really
we got married.
I'm sorry, I didn't split you up.
Because you said the final product turned out better than we could have imagined. I was like, yeah, we got married.
Oh yeah, there's that.
That's it. That's how we were like, oh, it's when you work on a project together, that's when you find out each other's, stuff. And that's when things can get really hairy. You hear about it all the time, couples who go into business together, and then this just destroys the marriage, destroys their lives. And you're like, oh man, but we worked on this project, and turns out we work really well together. We have complementary character strengths that mesh really well to be able to create a final product. And I think creating a book like this is a great example of what great things can be done when you have the right partner.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
So I guess the next question for you then, both, would kind of like, do you think you'd ever work on another book together, Viking or non-Viking? I mean, obviously, it's always going to be Viking to a degree, I suppose.
Yeah, it's going to be a little Viking. We've talked about it. I think with having a baby thrown into the mix, it's been a little hard to actually make it happen, but we want to do another one at some point.
What's your
I
ideas
like
for
the
this
idea of the
next
girl one. Yeah.
Yeah, the girl one, or we talked about doing one about knights.
Hmm.
Oh, yes.
That was an interesting one. We thought about doing just a whole little series about different subjects in history. And
And also,
I'm up for it.
when you have the one that you're working on,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
like your project.
I'm working on my own project right now. It's not a history book, but it's just a good little book for it's geared toward little girls, and it's kind of like a little journey of like self acceptance and making friends, and I think it'll be a nice little addition to my, I guess you could call it my portfolio.
Mhm.
But I'm open to doing more little history books for kids.
Well, that's lovely to hear, because certainly got me thinking kind of like, what else can they do besides the kind of like the generic Viking aspect? Like, could you do one like on specific historical figures, such as kind of like Leif the Lucky or William the Conqueror, and tell it from their point of view, so to speak? But I guess there's a lot of history involved with both characters. It depends on how you narrow it down and simplify it again for children, no matter what age group you're looking at.
Mm-hmm. I really like the girls per se. Instead of I'm a Viking, I'm a shield maiden. That'd be awesome.
I'm a shield maiden.
That would be awesome. And we could use like the Burka warrior, right? JB, whatever. And how she's an archer and rides horseback, and that'd be interesting. That'd be fun.
I think that would be
fun.
I
mean, Nancy Marie Brown's written about her kind of like very specifically from a very narrative point of view, albeit then going into the history of where this woman could have been and where she went and learnt her military skills and stuff. So I don't see how it couldn't be a children's book about her.
Oh, I do have one. This is a real one that we've entertained, that I've actually written out, and it's an exploration of the Viking Age for the York Viking Museum. And it's but the problem is I want to make sure that everything we do is kosher with the museum itself, because I want to go through, because I have pictures of all their exhibits and everything, but from the perspective of Lloyd the Viking Pooh.
Oh, wow.
And so basically do like a Hanky the Christmas Pooh from South Park, right? So basically and Crystal started drawing the beginning where their two kids are looking in at the glass with the Lloyd's Bank coprolite, and then its eyes open and go twing, and he's just like, and I don't have a unique voice for him yet, but he'd be like, howdy ho, I'm Lloyd the Viking Pooh. And then the kids on the side where he's teaching them all about the Viking Age, but the kids in the back are just horrified by this grotesque abomination. Like, Anyway, it's one of those ideas, but I think it would be funny and it could still be educational. I think kids would get a kick out of it. The thing is how that's not something
actually get away with it.
I think the Viking Museum or the museum in York would have to sign off on it, and I don't even know how to navigate their system yet. So
yes.
Yeah.
It's a question of whether the adults would be in the museum would be happy with a poo becoming. I mean, it is a renowned, famous poo because it's the largest coprolite ever found, as far as I know, at least in York, for example. But I kind of thought maybe kind of like a nice alternative would be maybe giving a voice and eyes to the sock, the singular sock that they've got. And it could be trying to tell people of the modern age kind of like where it last saw its partner before it got in the mud and filth somewhere.
So we're the ideas are kind of circulating in the head, like we always are coming up with strange ideas for the next kid's book, and what would work. I
don't know. I think a sock would be more kosher. Now that I hear it.
But I think the project she's currently working on, you didn't say the title, but it's
called The Monster on My Head.
And it's about little girls learning how to tame their head of hair.
Wow, that's really interesting.
I think that's a great little.
Best of luck with it. It sounds like a book that girls, I think, would appreciate and certainly need in some ways.
Yeah, I think so. And I haven't seen really a lot of them. So I was like, I'm gonna make one myself.
Mhm.
And I like
Even
that.
with
I
a
think
boy.
I find that
Even though
a
we
lot
had a
of
boy.
creatives that I speak to, kind of like they often create what they would like to read, or they would like to hear, or stories that they'd like to know more about. And then if it happens to hit a target with a popular audience, then that's a blessing, kind of thing. It's partly why I do this, because I just like to talk about Vikings. I don't have anyone in my immediate life or network that talk about Vikings, so I pilcher people from all over the world. Hence why you're here.
Yeah.
And yeah. And we have our own little Viking boy now to read this little Viking book to. Not that he'll sit very long. He'd rather play with swords than read,
Oh, yeah.
but we
He's a
keep
Viking.
trying.
War cry all the time. There's a inside voice.
That's a Bluey reference if I ever heard one.
Yeah.
See, my little girl, she just growls if she gets really frustrated and cross. She just turns into a growling, kind of like almost. She's borderline turning into a teenager, and she's only 5.5. That's just
5,
her.
5, 15.
So, Crystal, were you kind of relieved to leave the vortex of Viking worlds after you'd finished this book, or did it kind of like leave you a little bit wanting to know more, or do you just get daily with CJ?
I mean, I kind of get my daily fill with CJ every day, but it did kind of leave me wanting to know a little bit more and to explore it a little bit more. But he feeds that every single day.
Although lately it's been the 100 Years War. I'm teaching a course on the 100 Years War for medievalist.net. So actually, there's some of the books back there that for the reference material. I've got my stack here. Those books just like on the desk, just ready to go. Like, so she's been hearing a lot about the 100 Years War, which, and so now it's the new the new fixation for the next. How many weeks left? 7. We have 7 more weeks
left.
7 more weeks. Yeah.
So I guess I should probably rephrase. I'm never left wanting. I'm never left wanting for more information, because every time he comes out at night after one of those classes, you'll never guess what I talked about in my presentation or my class today. They ask wonderful questions. I have new information for you, and I'm just like, how did you come out of there with new information when you're teaching the class? And he's like, well, my students.
It's not new information, but it's a new way of looking at something.
Perspective.
Yeah. Sometimes students will ask questions, and you're just like, "That's an interesting way to look at it. Let's explore that." And we do the little thought process in the discussion, or the was it a thought experiment, and then come in and then go, those are always fun because they help you kind of see things from new perspectives. But yes, I do like to share them because I'm like, I just potentially learned something new.
I'll be reading in bed
Sorry. No, you carry on.
Oh, I just said I'll be reading in bed, and he'll just like slide into the room, and he'll be like, guess what?
Actually, first it's, sweetie darling, are you sleeping? No. Okay, guess what?
If it's any consolation, my husband does pretty much the same thing with just his day job. He'll kind of like get frustrated about something, and then he'll tell me all about it, even though I cannot help. I don't understand half of what he's frustrated about, but I'm just there to let him vent and explore and let it all out. And maybe then he'll go away and realise what he needs to do next. But I tend not to berate him too much with my history things. Although I will say this, my daughter does know who Thor is, and she can say Thor's hammer's name, but sometimes she forgets who he uses the hammer on, so I have to keep reminding her it's giants, darling. It's giants. Thor kills giants, and that's it.
Did he marry one too?
Did he?
the Aesir marry giants, and they have romantic relationships with them. So they kill them and have romantic relationships.
He's married to Sif, but I don't know if he's had affairs like, of course, his all-father Odin does, because Odin gets around a lot.
Well, some of the other Aesir,
oh goodness,
canoodled with giants as well. So it's weird. It's yeah.
It gets a little blurry in the details after a while.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think you might maybe go from the history and touch more on the mythology, possibly next book? Maybe not on all the gods, but maybe you could do a children's book about Thor.
Oh, I'd be really pleased to do a book about that. That would be really fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the
I mean,
historically
there are good
accurate
kids'
Thor.
books out there about Thor. I've got just one on my shelf, and of course it touches a lot on what we know from the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda, and of course Snorri Sturluson's debatable work. But yeah,
we have one picture of Thor.
Thor, the redhead.
Of course, Thor's had many adventures, which I think kids wouldn't know about necessarily, because of course kids are fed the Marvel Universe version of Thor, which is very, very un-Thor-esque, I would say, based on the original.
Entertaining.
Yeah, entertaining, but not quite so. Yeah, I don't want to say accurate, because I don't know what's accurate and what's not.
Well, the mythology's all over the place. So.
Yeah.
It is. It's always debated. I mean, it's only, I think, kind of like in the recent century or so that a lot of academics are starting to really be critical or doubtful of what Snorri Sturluson at least put, because that's what a lot of people go to when they first want to know about Norse mythology, because he kind of wrote the handbook, so to speak, even though he had his own agenda and bias. Like a lot of people I've been reading about who've been studying kind of like certainly modern interpretations of mythology keep pointing out that how he did have an agenda behind it. He was a Christian scribe centuries after the time that these myths were believed in properly or worshipped properly. And that's why there are so few goddess tales, but more god tales, which is a whole other topic. I would love to talk to someone about kind of like the divvying up of why we've got so much about Odin, but not so much about Frigg. We know a little bit about Freya, but not so much about Sif and all that kind of thing.
You should have Matthias Nordvig on your show. He's a wealth of information on all that. I think he's currently teaching at Boulder. But he's got some really interesting modern scholarly interpretations of all the mythologies. So somebody to consider having on your show down the road.
Thank you. I will add him to what I lovingly call my hit list, even though I don't assassinate, I just hound them and eventually get them on.
How's done?
They just use my email, all right. Oh, well, it's been wonderful talking to you both, and I certainly will look forward to when my own little boy is old enough to appreciate this book. And I've yet to try it on my little girl, simply because she's very much into her Disney Princess and Elsa era. And she's got no concept of history. Plus, she's only just recently seen even part of her first ever David Attenborough nature documentary, and she got quite emotional about the fate of a little shark that was trying to be eaten by other big sharks. And she said, "Don't! I can't look, Mum. Don't tell me who it lives." I said, "Well, it's predators. This is wildlife. I mean, we're predators. We kill chickens. How did you get chicken nuggets?" And then, of course, she said, "Well, all parents are like, oh, I don't want chicken nuggets anymore." And I'm like, "You can't tell me that. I've got 44 in the freezer."
We had something similar with our little one. We were reading, it was like a nature book, and he was very concerned about this porcupine getting overtaken by lava from a volcano, and he just kept going, "Oh no! Oh
yeah,
no!"
that's right.
Bless him.
And we
They
had
do
to
get
put the
so
book
invested,
away.
don't they?
Yeah, and then we changed the page, like, no, let's keep going because the bear is going to go do this, and then he'd be like, no, and then change the page back to the porcupine. Oh no!
Oh no!
We had to take it away from him. Yeah. Trauma. That was his first trauma. I'm saving for a therapist. Just put it away in the coin jar.
Yeah.
He's gonna need it.
Crazy thing is, they won't remember all these little fears that they had, but we'll remember them. Well, thank you so much again, guys, for coming to talk to me about this wonderful book. I do recommend people go get it. It's available on Amazon. I Am a Viking, a history book about the Vikings for kids, story by CJ and illustrations by lovely Crystal. So thank you so much for your time today, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
And of course, do let me know when you next do another children's book for Vikings.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
you very much for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed the discussions between my special guests and myself. Please do check out the episode blurb for links to their works and websites. If you liked this episode, let me know by giving it a thumbs up. Let me know if you learned something new in the comments. And of course, click subscribe to Valhalla Conversations wherever you are listening or watching. This podcast can be watched on YouTube and YouTube Music, and it can also be listened to on Spotify, Amazon Music, Podcast Index, and on rss.com. We hope you can join us in Valhalla again soon for more conversations.